My wife and her sisters thought it was funny to dash, prank, mu epsilon on my birthday. They put nuts into my food knowing that I'm allergic to nuts, laughing as they drove off yelling, "Good luck." I never went back. 5 years later, she found me and her smile vanished when she saw who stood behind me. Look, I'm not saying I'm a genius or anything, but I always thought that when you married someone, there was this unspoken agreement that they wouldn't, you know, actively try to kill you. Call me old-fashioned, but I figured attempted murder was kind of a deal breaker in the whole till death do us part arrangement. Turns out, I was being naive. Who knew that wedding vows came with a giant asterisk that read, "Unless it's really funny, then all bets are off"? So there I was, turning 32 years old on a completely unremarkable Tuesday in September, sitting at my own dining room table like some kind of unsuspecting lamb being led to slaughter. My wife Sabrina had been acting weird all day, which, honestly, should have been my first clue. She'd been giggling with her sisters Bella and Casey all afternoon, whispering in that conspiratorial way that women do when they're either planning a surprise party or plotting your demise. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a surprise party. We made everything from scratch, Sabrina announced with this proud smile that would have been adorable if I didn't know what was coming. She placed a heaping plate of pasta in front of me, and I'm not gonna lie, it looked pretty damn good. The kind of homemade meal that makes you think maybe your marriage isn't circling the drain after all. Maybe your wife actually loves you. Maybe those YouTube prank videos she and her sisters have been posting aren't slowly eroding your soul, one humiliating clip at a time. Yeah, I was an idiot. Bella, the middle sister with her perfectly straightened blonde hair and that permanently smug expression, brought out the salad. "You're gonna love this," she said, and I swear to God, the way she emphasized love should have sent every alarm bell in my head into full meltdown mode. But nope, I just smiled like the trusting fool I was and grabbed my fork. Casey, the youngest at 26 and somehow the most sadistic of the three, pulled out her phone. Wait, wait, let me get a good angle," she said, positioning herself near the kitchen doorway. "The lighting's perfect here. Are you seriously filming me eating dinner?" I asked, but I was already used to this. Everything was content for their channel. My life had become a never-ending reality show where I was simultaneously the star and the punchline, and I never got to see the script. "Just eat," Sabrina said, that smile still plastered on her face. "It's your birthday, babe. Enjoy." So I did. I twirled some pasta on my fork, took a bite, and immediately knew something was wrong. There was this texture, this grainy, off-putting crunch that didn't belong. I chewed slowly, my brain trying to process what the hell I was tasting, and then it hit me. Not metaphorically, literally hit me, like my tongue had just made contact with a live electrical wire. Almonds. My throat started doing this thing where it decided oxygen was overrated. You know that feeling when you're drinking something and it goes down the wrong pipe? Imagine that, except the pipe is closing and you're pretty sure you're about to die in your own dining room while wearing a stupid birthday hat shaped like a beer mug. Oh my God, I wheezed, standing up so fast my chair fell backward. There's nuts in this." The three of them looked at each other and burst out laughing. Not like a polite, "Oops, we made a mistake" chuckle. I'm talking full-on cackling, the kind of laughter you'd hear from villains in a cartoon after they've successfully tied the hero to the railroad tracks. "Surprise!" Bella yelled, doubling over. "You should see your face right now," Casey said, her phone still recording, probably already editing the thumbnail in her mind. "Almost killed my brother-in-law prank, gone wrong." I stumbled toward the counter where I kept my EpiPen in the drawer, because yes, I'd had to use one before. About 3 years ago, Sabrina's mom had brought peanut butter cookies to Thanksgiving without telling anyone, and I'd spent the night in the ER explaining to a very tired doctor that no, I didn't eat the cookie on purpose, and yes, my in-laws were actually this clueless. Or so I'd thought at the time. Clueless implies accident. This was premeditated. My hands were shaking as I grabbed the EpiPen, and I'm not exaggerating when I say my vision was starting to tunnel. You know how in movies when someone's dying and everything gets all blurry and distant? Yeah, it's exactly like that, except there's no dramatic music, just your wife and her sisters laughing their asses off while you stab yourself in the thigh with a needle full of epinephrine. "Oh, come on, don't be so dramatic," Sabrina said, wiping tears from her eyes. "You'll be fine. You always are." "Yeah, he'll survive," Bella added, like she was some kind of medical professional and not just a 29-year-old influencer whose main qualification was knowing how to apply false eyelashes. I sat on the floor, back against the cabinet, trying to breathe while my heart raced from the adrenaline. The EpiPen had done its job. I wasn't dying anymore, which was great news, but I was far from okay. My hands were trembling, my throat felt like sandpaper, and I was pretty sure I could hear my heartbeat in my ears like some kind of Edgar Allan Poe nightmare. This isn't funny, I managed to croak out, looking up at the three of them. You could have actually killed me. Casey lowered her phone for exactly 2 seconds before bringing it back up. But we didn't, she said cheerfully. Content gold, honestly. This is going to get so many views. And that's when Sabrina grabbed her purse, Bella grabbed her keys, and Casey kept filming as they headed toward the front door like they were leaving a particularly entertaining movie. Wait, where are you going? I asked, still on the floor, still wheezing, still trying to process what the hell was happening. Girls' night. Sabrina called over her shoulder. You said you wanted a quiet birthday, right? Well, enjoy. Love you. Good luck, birthday boy. Bella added with a wave. The door slammed shut. I heard their laughter echo in the driveway. Then car doors, then the engine starting. And then they were gone. And I was alone on my kitchen floor, clutching an empty EpiPen, surrounded by plates of attempted murder pasta and almond-contaminated birthday cake. I sat there for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to my heartbeat slowly return to normal, and thinking one very clear thought. Maybe the universe is sending me a hint. Maybe it was time to stop being the punchline. Maybe it was time to stop pretending that it's just a prank was an acceptable excuse for cruelty. Maybe it was time to realize that the woman I'd married 5 years ago either never existed or had been replaced by someone who valued YouTube views more than her husband's life. Spoiler alert, I listened. I listened real good. And by the time the sun came up the next morning, I'd already made my decision. This marriage, this life, this never-ending humiliation parade, it was done. I was done. But first, I had to survive the night. And maybe eat something that wouldn't send me back to the ER. I was thinking McDonald's. At least they label their allergens. The thing about epinephrine is that it saves your life, but makes you feel like you just ran a marathon while chugging Red Bull and listening to heavy metal at full volume. My heart was doing this weird jumpy thing where it couldn't decide if it wanted to explode or just give up entirely, and I'm pretty sure I could taste colors. So yeah, around 3 in the morning, when I still felt like death warmed over, I called myself an Uber and went to the ER like a responsible adult who'd just been poisoned by his own wife. The driver, this guy named Muhammad with a pristine 5-star rating, took one look at me and said, "Rough night, brother?" You could say that, I muttered, climbing into the back seat. My wife tried to kill me with Italian food. He laughed, thinking I was joking. I didn't correct him. What was I going to say? No. Seriously, she literally put almonds in everything because attempted murder is apparently hilarious when you film it. The man was just trying to make his money and get home. He didn't need my tragic backstory. The hospital smelled exactly like every hospital I'd ever been in. That special combination of disinfectant, desperation, and whatever they use to mop the floors that makes everything smell vaguely like fake lemons. I checked in at the front desk, explained my situation to a nurse who looked like she'd heard every excuse in the book, and got shuffled into a room where I sat on one of those paper-covered beds that crinkles every time you move. A doctor who looked about 12 years old came in, read my chart, and said, "Severe allergic reaction to tree nuts, self-administered epinephrine, currently stable, but experiencing tachycardia." Is that accurate? Yeah, that's the fancy version, I said. The non-fancy version is my wife put almonds in my birthday dinner knowing I'm allergic. I almost died, and now I'm here. The kid doctor blinked at me. Your wife did this on purpose? For YouTube views. I added because why not? Might as well say it out loud. She and her sisters have a prank channel. I'm the unpaid stunt dummy. He didn't know what to say to that, which was fair. What do you say when someone tells you their marriage is basically a low-budget Jackass reboot? So he just hooked me up to Infordrip, gave me some antihistamines, and told me they wanted to monitor me for a few hours to make sure I didn't have a delayed reaction. Does she do this often? He asked, and I could tell he was trying to figure out if he needed to call someone. Like the police, or a social worker, or maybe an exorcist. Define this, I said, leaning back against the pillows. The attempted murder? First time. The pranks? That's a daily thing, Doc. And that's when I started replaying the greatest hits of my marriage, lying there in that hospital bed with an 4 in my arm and way too much time to think. Because when you're stuck somewhere at 4 in the morning with nothing but fluorescent lights and the distant sound of someone coding in another room, your brain starts pulling up all the receipts you've been trying to ignore. Like the time Sabrina posted my high school photo on Facebook. You know, the one from sophomore year when I had braces and acne and hair gel that made me look like I'd stuck my finger in an electrical socket. She'd captioned it, hashtag puberty did not hit him, and tagged all my coworkers. I'd asked her to take it down, and she'd laughed and said, "Babe, it's just a joke. Learn to laugh at yourself." Or the fake lottery ticket incident. She'd given me a scratch-off that said I'd won $50,000. I'd literally started crying. We'd been struggling with bills, my car had just died, and I thought maybe, just maybe, the universe was throwing me a bone. I called my mom, started looking up how to claim the prize, even researched how lottery taxes worked. And then Sabrina pulled out her phone, showed me the video she'd been recording the whole time, and told me it was fake. "You should have seen your face," she'd said, like watching hope die in someone's eyes was peak entertainment. There was the time she and her sisters convinced me that my boss had called a meeting to fire me. I'd spent 3 days stressed out of my mind, updating my resume, applying to new jobs, barely sleeping. Turned out, there was no meeting. They'd faked the email. "Gotcha," Bella had yelled when I finally figured it out. Casey had already posted the video, convincing my brother-in-law he's getting fired, and it had gotten 200,000 views. I could keep going. The short-sheeted bed on our anniversary. The time they replaced my shampoo with Nair, and I almost went bald. The fake parking tickets. The emails to my family pretending to be me saying weird, embarrassing stuff. 5 years of this. 5 years of being the butt of every joke, the punchline to every bit, the collateral damage in their quest for internet fame. And I'd let it happen. That was the worst part. I'd convinced myself it was fine, that this was just how her family was, that if I couldn't take a joke, then I was the problem. I'd laughed along, played the good sport, told myself it wasn't that bad. But lying there in that hospital bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. This wasn't love. This was abuse with a laugh track. The nurse came back around 6 in the morning, checked my vitals, and told me I was good to go. "Someone coming to pick you up?" she asked. I thought about calling Sabrina. I thought about going home, having the big confrontation, demanding an apology, maybe even suggesting marriage counseling like some optimistic idiot who still believed things could be fixed. And then I thought about that video Casey had taken last night, probably already uploaded, probably already getting comments like "LOL his face" and "Savage Sisters," and "This is hilarious." "Nah," I told the nurse. "I'm good." I walked out of that hospital at 6:30 in the morning, still wearing the same clothes from last night, smelling like hospital and regret, and headed straight for the bus station. I didn't go home, didn't grab clothes, didn't pack a bag, didn't leave a note. I walked into that Greyhound station like a man on a mission, looked at the departure board, and picked the first bus heading north. Didn't matter where it was going, just mattered that it was leaving. The ticket cost $47. The lady behind the counter, this older woman with reading glasses on a chain, asked if I wanted round trip. "One way," I said. "You sure, honey? It's cheaper if you." "One way." I repeated, sliding 2 20s and a 10 across the counter. "Definitely one way." She printed the ticket, handed it to me with my change, and said, "Safe travels." I sat in that station for 40 minutes, watching people come and go, families hugging, couples arguing, some businessman yelling into his phone about quarterly reports. And I felt nothing. No guilt, no second thoughts, no dramatic moment of doubt. Just this weird sense of calm, like I'd finally made a decision that made sense. When they called my bus, I stood up, walked outside, climbed those steps, found a seat in the back by the window, and watched the city disappear behind me. My phone buzzed a few times, probably Sabrina finally noticing I wasn't home, but I turned it off and shoved it in my pocket. I was leaving behind my house, my clothes, my car, my job, my entire life. And weirdly enough, I was leaving behind a fridge full of almond milk. The irony wasn't lost on me. But more than anything, I was leaving behind the person I'd become. The guy who let himself be the joke, who accepted humiliation as affection, who thought love was supposed to hurt this much. That guy? He could stay in that city, in that house, in that life. Me? I was heading north, to anywhere that wasn't here, to become anyone who wasn't him. Best birthday present I ever gave myself. The bus ride took about 7 hours, which gave me plenty of time to contemplate my life choices and also to sleep like the dead against a window that rattled every time we hit a pothole. I woke up with drool on my face and a crick in my neck that felt like someone had tried to tie my spine into a pretzel. But you know what? Still better than waking up next to someone who thought attempted murder was quality content. We made stops in towns I'd never heard of, places with names like Greenfield and Riverside, and other generic combinations of nature words that probably sounded charming to the people who founded them in like 1840. I watched people get on and off, living their normal lives, going to visit grandma, or heading to work or running away from their own disasters. I wondered how many of them were fleeing something too. Probably more than you'd think. Nobody takes a Tuesday morning Greyhound bus because life is going great. Around 2 in the afternoon, the driver announced we were pulling into Willow Bay, and I figured this was as good a place as any to start over. I'd never heard of it, which meant Sabrina definitely hadn't either, and that was pretty much my only requirement for a new hometown. That, and hopefully a distinct lack of tree nuts in the local cuisine. I grabbed my backpack, which contained exactly nothing because I'd literally walked out with just my wallet and keys, and stepped off the bus into what I can only describe as the most aggressively coastal town I'd ever seen. And I mean that in the best way possible. The air smelled like salt water and fried fish. There were seagulls screaming at each other like they were in some kind of territorial gang war, and everything looked slightly weathered in that way that happens when the ocean decides to personally age your buildings for you. The bus station, if you could even call it that, was basically a bench with a faded schedule posted on a telephone pole. No building, no ticket counter, just a bench and a dream. Very inspiring. Next to the bench was a hand-painted sign that said, "Welcome to Willow Bay, population 847." But someone had crossed out the 847 and written "Who's counting?" in marker. I immediately loved this place. I started walking down what appeared to be the main street, which had about 6 businesses total. A diner called the Krusty Catch, appetizing name, guys. A bait and tackle shop, a post office the size of my old bathroom, a liquor store with bars on the windows, a laundromat, and a motel with a neon sign that flickered between vacancy and vacant Y, like it couldn't commit to the full word. Perfect. I walked into the motel office, where a bell dinged above my head like I was entering a 1950s sitcom. Behind the counter sat a woman who had to be at least 70, doing a crossword puzzle and smoking a cigarette, even though there were at least 3 signs saying "no smoking" on the walls. She looked up at me with eyes that had seen some serious stuff and said, "You lost or running?" "Running," I said, because apparently I'd decided honesty was my new policy. "Good," she said, exhaling smoke out the side of her mouth. "Lost people are annoying. They want directions and Wi-Fi passwords and all kinds of needy crap. Running people just want a bed and to be left alone." "That's exactly what I want," I said. 60 a week, paid up front, no refunds, no visitors after 10, no cooking in the rooms, and if you break anything, you buy it. She said all this without looking up from her crossword. Cash only. I pulled out my wallet and counted out $60, which left me with about 200 and change to my name. I was going to need a job, like, immediately, but that was a problem for tomorrow me. Today me just needed a door that locked and a horizontal surface to pass out on. She handed me a key, an actual metal key, not a key card, attached to a plastic diamond-shaped keychain that said Room 7 in faded marker. Checkout's at 11. Ice machine's broken. Don't park in front of room 3. That's Jerry's spot, and he gets weird about it. "Who's Jerry?" I asked. "You'll know him when you see him," she said, returning to her crossword. "He's the one who looks like he fought a shark and lost." I decided not to ask for clarification and headed to room 7, which smelled exactly like she'd promised. Wet carpet with a side of old fries, probably from the 1990s. The bed had a floral comforter that had definitely seen better decades. The TV was one of those old box ones that weighed more than a small car, and there was a painting of a lighthouse on the wall that was hung slightly crooked. The bathroom had tile that might have been white once upon a time and a shower that made a concerning grinding noise when I turned the handle. It was perfect. I lay down on that questionable bed, fully clothed, without even pulling back the covers because I wasn't ready to know what condition the sheets were in, and for the first time in years, Literally years. I slept without my phone next to me. Without Sabrina's ringtone waking me up at 2 in the morning because she'd decided it was hilarious to set alarms on my phone. Without the sound of her sisters cackling in the living room while they edited their latest content. Without the anxiety that came from wondering what fresh humiliation tomorrow would bring. I slept for 14 hours straight and woke up feeling like I'd been reborn. The next morning, I walked into the Krusty Catch and ordered coffee and whatever breakfast special they had going. The waitress, a woman in her 40s with a name tag that said Deb, brought me eggs and bacon and toast without asking any questions, which I appreciated. The guy sitting next to me at the counter, who I assumed was Jerry based on the 3-inch scar running down his face, nodded at me and said, "New." "Brand new," I said. "Running from something or towards something?" he asked, which seemed to be the universal question in this town. "Running from," I admitted. "But maybe towards something too. Haven't decided yet." "Fair enough," Jerry said, returning to his pancakes. "Tommy's usually hiring if you need work. Painting, odd jobs, whatever. I'll pay you cash if you don't ask questions." "Tommy," I asked. "Owns the place," Deb said, refilling my coffee. "He's in the back. I'll tell him you're looking." And just like that, I had a job. Or at least, the promise of one. Tommy turned out to be this guy in his 50s with a gut that suggested he sampled his own cooking regularly and a handshake that could crush diamonds. He looked me up and down and said, "You know how to paint?" "I can learn," I said. "Good enough. Got a dock that needs doing. 15 an hour, cash, you start tomorrow." By the end of my first week in Willow Bay, I'd painted that dock, fixed a fence for some lady who paid me in cash and homemade cookies, nut-free. I checked, and helped clean boats at the marina for a guy who introduced himself only as captain and never elaborated. The locals didn't care who I was or where I came from. When people asked my name, I said Aaron Miles without thinking about it, just pulled it out of thin air, a fresh identity for a fresh start. Aaron Miles didn't have a wife who tried to kill him. Aaron Miles didn't spend 5 years being humiliated for views. Aaron Miles fixed fences and painted docks and ate dinner at the Krusty Catch and went home to his motel room that smelled like old fries. Aaron Miles was free. And freedom, it turned out, tasted a lot like instant noodles and peace. Weird combination, but I'd take it. So here's the thing about manual labor in coastal towns during August. It's basically like volunteering to be slow roasted by the sun while the humidity tries to drown you from the outside in. But did I know this when I agreed to paint Captain Whoever's dock in the middle of the afternoon? Nope. Because I was an idiot who thought that just because I'd survived attempted murder by pasta, I was suddenly immune to all other forms of death. Spoiler alert. Heat exhaustion doesn't care about your tragic backstory. I'd been out there for maybe 3 hours, slapping white paint on sun-bleached wood, sweating through my shirt like I was auditioning for a deodorant commercial about failure. The captain had wandered off around noon, mumbling something about checking his nets, which left me alone with a paint roller, 17 screaming seagulls, and the kind of heat that makes you understand why people in deserts hallucinate oases. My mistake was thinking I could tough it out. Very masculine, very stupid. I'd already drunk all the water I'd brought, which was 1 bottle, because apparently I thought I was a camel, and I was starting to feel weird. Like, dizzy weird. Like my brain is cooking inside my skull weird. But I only had maybe a quarter of the dock left to finish, and Aaron Miles wasn't a quitter. Aaron Miles was a guy who finished what he started, even if what he started was apparently giving himself heat stroke for $15 an hour. I remember kneeling down to paint a lower board, then feeling this wave of nausea that made the world tilt sideways. And then, nothing. Lights out. My consciousness just said, "I'm done with this," and pieced out like it had better places to be. When I woke up, I was staring at ceiling tiles that were significantly less water-stained than my motel rooms, which I took as a good sign. There was an 4 in my arm again. Seriously, this was becoming a concerning pattern, and someone was standing over me with a blood pressure cuff and an expression that suggested she'd seen this exact brand of stupidity before. "He's awake," she called over her shoulder, then looked down at me with eyes that could cut glass. "Welcome back to the land of the living, genius. You know what a water bottle is." I blinked at her, my brain still trying to load like a computer from 2003. She was probably in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with gray streaks running through dark brown hair she'd pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her scrubs had little cartoon thermometers on them, which seemed ironic given how cold her stare was. The name tag pinned to her chest read, Nurse Joe, in that standard medical font they all use. I had water. I croaked, my throat feeling like I'd gargled sand. 1 bottle, she said, writing something on a chart. In 95-degree heat, in full sun, for 3 hours. Did you fail math or just common sense? Both. I offered, which made her mouth twitch in what might have been amusement or might have been her suppressing the urge to smack me with the chart. You're lucky Mike saw you collapse and had the sense to drag your stupid ass up here, she said, checking the 4-bag. You were about 30 minutes from serious damage. Your core temp was 103.5. Who's Mike? I asked, trying to sit up and immediately regretting it when the room did a fun little spinning thing. Captain Mike, she clarified, pushing me back down with one hand. Don't move yet. Your blood pressure's still figuring out what numbers mean. And yes, the captain has a real name. Shocking, I know. I lay there while she checked various things, my vitals, my pupils, my ability to answer basic questions like, what year is it? And who's the president? I got the year right, but honestly blanked on the president because my brain was still booting up. After about 20 minutes of this, she declared me stable but idiotic and told me I needed to stay for observation. This is a clinic? I asked, looking around at what appeared to be someone's converted house. Town's too small for a real hospital, Joe said, sitting down in a rolling chair that squeaked. This is what we've got. I handle everything from splinters to heart attacks, and apparently heat exhaustion from people who think they're invincible. I don't think I'm invincible, I protested. I just needed the money. You need a brain is what you need, she shot back, but there was less edge to it now. How long you been in town? About 3 weeks. Staying at Rita's motel? Room 7. She nodded like this told her everything she needed to know about my life circumstances. You got people who know you're here? Someone I should call? Nope, I said, probably a little too quickly. Just me. Aaron Miles, professional idiot, party of one. Joe studied me for a long moment, and I got the distinct impression she was reading between the lines, seeing all the stuff I wasn't saying, all the reasons a guy shows up in a nowhere town with nothing but the clothes on his back and a fake name. But instead of prying, she just nodded and said, well, Aaron Miles, you're going to sit here for another hour while I make sure you don't drop dead on my watch. Then you're going to go home, drink about a gallon of water, and not do anything stupid for at least 24 hours. Think you can handle that? I'll try, I said. Trying's how you ended up here, she muttered, but I caught the hint of a smile. She left me alone for a bit, and I could hear her in another room talking to someone, a male voice, deeper, with that same no-nonsense tone she had. When she came back, there was a guy following her who looked like he'd eaten every breakfast special at the Krusty Catch for the past decade and enjoyed every bite. This is my brother Tommy, Joe said. Tommy, this is the idiot who tried to die on Mike's dock. Hey, Tommy said, extending a hand the size of a baseball mitt. Heard you're new in town. Need work. I shook his hand, which was like shaking hands with a friendly bear. I mean, yeah, but apparently I'm bad at not dying while doing it. Tommy laughed, this big booming sound that filled the whole clinic. Mike said you painted 3/4 of that dock before you went down. That's dedication. Stupid, but dedicated. He pulled up a chair and sat down with a wheeze. Look, I own the Krusty Catch. You been there? Every day, I admitted. Deb makes good coffee. Deb makes terrible coffee, but she makes a lot of it, Tommy corrected. Listen, I need someone who can do odd jobs, flipping pancakes during the breakfast rush, fixing whatever breaks, which is everything because that building's older than I am. 15 an hour, cash, and I promise you won't die of heat stroke because it's all indoors. You offering me a job? I asked, glancing at Joe, who was pretending not to listen while definitely listening. I'm offering you a chance to not be stupid outside, Tommy said. What do you say? What did I say? I said yes, obviously. Because lying there in that clinic, hooked up to and for the second time in a month, being scolded by a nurse who somehow reminded me of every tough love teacher I'd ever had, and being offered employment by a guy who looked like he gave great hugs and even better advice. This felt right. This felt like the universe saying, okay, you ran away from the disaster. Now here's the part where you build something new. So I took the job. Started the next day, after Joe made me promise approximately 17 times that I would hydrate, like a normal human being, and wear sunscreen, because I don't need you back here with third-degree burns, you walking disaster. Tommy put me on breakfast duty first, scrambling eggs, flipping pancakes, making toast that only burned occasionally. It was simple work, honest work, the kind of thing where at the end of the day you could actually see what you'd accomplished. People came in, I fed them, they paid, they left happy. Nobody was filming me. Nobody was waiting for me to mess up so they could laugh. I was just a guy making breakfast in a diner that smelled like bacon grease and possibility. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt useful. Not like a prop in someone else's show, not like collateral damage in someone's quest for content. Just useful. Alive. Real. Turns out that's what freedom tastes like. Burnt toast and redemption, served with a side of crispy bacon. About 6 months into my new life as Aaron Miles, professional pancake flipper and guy who no longer gets poisoned by his wife, I'd settled into a pretty comfortable routine. Wake up at 5, which used to be my personal hell, but now felt weirdly peaceful. Walk to the diner, prep the kitchen, serve breakfast to the same 12 people who came in every morning like clockwork, handle whatever broke that day. Usually the toilet, sometimes the toaster, once a window when Jerry got into it with a seagull, and go home smelling like maple syrup and fryer oil. It was simple. It was predictable. It was exactly what I needed. And then, naturally, because the universe can't let me have nice things for too long, everything went sideways on a completely normal Wednesday morning. I was working the breakfast rush, and by rush, I mean there were like 8 people in the diner instead of the usual 5, when the door banged open so hard the little bell above it basically had a panic attack. Everyone looked up, because in Willow Bay when something loud happens, it's either exciting or someone's fishing boat just sank, and either way you want to know about it. Standing in the doorway was this tall guy, probably mid-30s, wearing a leather jacket that had seen better days and jeans that were torn in a way that definitely wasn't a fashion choice. He was pale, like I donate blood for a living pale, and there was this dark stain spreading across his side that I really hoped was just oil or paint or literally anything other than what it obviously was. Blood. That was blood. So much blood. He took 2 steps toward the counter, looked directly at me with eyes that were struggling to focus, and said, "Sorry about this," before collapsing face first onto the counter with a thud that made everyone's coffee cups rattle. For a second, nobody moved. We all just stared at this guy who'd apparently decided our diner was a great place to audition for a crime scene. Then Deb screamed. Not like a horror movie scream. More like an annoyed, not again scream, and suddenly everyone was moving at once. "Call Joe," Tommy yelled from the kitchen, already heading over with a stack of dish towels. On it, I grabbed the phone and dialed the clinic, which I'd memorized after my heat stroke incident because apparently I was collecting medical emergencies like Pokemon cards. Joe answered on the second ring. "Willow Bay Clinic. This better be good." "Hey, it's Aaron from the diner. We've got a guy who just collapsed, and he's bleeding everywhere, and I think maybe you should come." "Bleeding from where?" she asked, all business now. I looked at the guy, who Tommy had managed to roll onto his back. The leather jacket had fallen open, revealing a white t-shirt that was definitely not supposed to be that red. His side? Maybe his ribs? "There's a lot of blood, Joe. Like, concerning amounts. Keep pressure on it. I'm 2 minutes away," she said and hung up. Tommy was already pressing towels against the guy's side, which was making this awful wet squelching sound that I could have gone my whole life without hearing. The stranger was conscious, barely, and making this low groaning noise that sounded like it hurt just to breathe. "Stay with me, buddy," Tommy said, his usual jolly demeanor replaced with this intense focus I'd never seen before. "You got a name?" "Grayson," the guy wheezed. "Sorry about the mess." "Don't worry about the mess," Tommy said. "Worry about not dying. We like our customers alive, better for repeat business." I grabbed more towels because the ones Tommy was using were already soaked through, and I was trying really hard not to think about the fact that this was definitely the most excitement Willow Bay had seen in months, and also potentially the most traumatic thing I'd witnessed since my wife tried to murder me with pasta. Different kind of trauma, but still. "What happened to you?" I asked, kneeling down next to him while we waited for Joe. Grayson's eyes rolled toward me, and even half dead he managed to look sarcastic. "Would you believe? I tripped." "Not even a little bit," I said. "Good instinct," he muttered, then winced. "Got shot." Disagreement with someone who disagreed violently. You need to call the cops? Tommy asked. Grayson laughed, which turned into a cough that sounded deeply unhealthy. Cops were the problem. Well, that was concerning. But before I could ask what he meant by that, Jo burst through the door with a medical bag that looked like it had been through a war. She took one look at the situation, said a word I'm pretty sure wasn't in any medical textbook, and immediately took over. Everyone back up, she ordered, pulling on gloves. Tommy, keep that pressure. Aaron, I need you to call for an ambulance. He needs a hospital. Nearest hospital's 40 minutes away, Tommy said. I know that, which is why I'm calling them now instead of later. Jo snapped, but her hands were gentle as she examined the wound. Looks like a through and through. Bullet missed anything vital, probably, but he's lost blood and I need to make sure he's not bleeding internally. She worked fast, cleaning the wound, packing it with gauze, wrapping it tight enough that Grayson gasped. The ambulance showed up about 15 minutes later, which was actually pretty impressive considering we were in the middle of nowhere, and they loaded him onto a stretcher while Jo rattled off medical information that sounded like she was speaking a different language. Before they wheeled him out, Grayson grabbed my wrist with a grip that was surprisingly strong for a guy who'd just bled all over our breakfast counter. Thanks, man, he said, his eyes clearer now, focused. Seriously, don't mention it, I said. Just maybe next time you need to collapse somewhere, try a hospital first? He smiled, actually smiled. And then they were wheeling him out and the diner was suddenly very quiet except for the sound of Tommy scrubbing blood off the counter and muttering about needing to replace the vinyl. That was intense, Deb said, pouring herself a cup of coffee with shaking hands. Who the hell gets shot before 8 in the morning? Someone having a worse day than us, I said, which got a snort from Jerry, who'd watched the whole thing while calmly eating his pancakes like dinner theater. The cops showed up about an hour later, 2 of them, looking very official and very suspicious. They asked questions about what we'd seen, what Grayson had said, whether we knew him. We told them the truth. Guy walked in bleeding. We called for help. That was it. They didn't seem satisfied, but they also didn't have anything to work with. So eventually they left with a warning to call if he comes back. You think he'll come back? I asked Tommy after they'd gone. Tommy shrugged, scraping the last of the blood-soaked towels into a garbage bag. If he does, we'll deal with it. Guy said thanks, didn't threaten anybody, just needed help. That's good enough for me. And that was that. We cleaned up, replaced the towels, and went back to serving breakfast like nothing had happened. Because that's what you do in small towns. Weird stuff happens, you deal with it, and then you move on. I figured that was the end of the Grayson story. Random stranger, dramatic entrance, probably never see him again. I was wrong. About a week later, I was closing up the diner. Wiping down tables, sweeping floors, doing all the glamorous stuff that comes with food service, when someone knocked on the door. I looked up, ready to point at the closed sign, and there he was. Grayson, standing there looking significantly less bloody and significantly more alive, with one hand pressed against his side like it still hurt, but he was trying not to show it. He had this sheepish expression on his face, like he wasn't sure if he was welcome or if we'd call the cops. I unlocked the door and let him in. Hey, he said, I know you're closed, but I wanted to thank you. Properly. Without all the bleeding. You're welcome, I said. You look better. Less actively dying. Yeah, turns out getting shot sucks, he said, attempting a smile. Doctors patched me up, said I was lucky. Quarter inch to the left, and I'd have been screwed. What happened? I asked, because subtle had never been my strong suit. Grayson hesitated, then sighed. Long story. Buy you a coffee, and I'll tell you. I looked at him. This stranger who'd literally collapsed in our diner, who'd been shot by someone, who'd made cryptic comments about cops being the problem, and thought about all the times I'd wanted someone to just listen without judging, without making it into content, without turning my pain into entertainment. Yeah, I said. Coffee sounds good. And that's how I met Grayson. Over coffee, after hours, in a diner that smelled like old grease and new beginnings. 2 guys with complicated pasts decided maybe they could figure out the future together, or at least not bleed on any more counters. So it turned out that Grayson wasn't just some random guy who'd gotten shot and decided to bleed all over our counter for fun. He was an ex-detective from somewhere up north. He was vague about the details, which I respected because I was also vague about my details, who'd made the catastrophic mistake of exposing a dirty cop. And by dirty, I don't mean he forgot to shower. I mean like evidence tampering, money laundering, probably involved in organized crime level of dirty. Grayson had done the right thing, gone through proper channels, reported it to internal affairs, followed the rules like a good little Boy Scout. And his reward? A bullet in the ribs, a target on his back, and a very strong suggestion from people who carried badges that maybe he should disappear for a while. So he'd ended up in Willow Bay, same as me, running from a life that had gone spectacularly wrong. We bonded over coffee that first night, trading war stories like veterans from two different but equally stupid battles. His involved actual gunfire and corruption. Mine involved tree nuts and YouTube views. Both of us had scars. His were just more visible and significantly cooler. So your wife tried to kill you with Italian food, Grayson said, stirring sugar into his cup with this expression that suggested he'd heard a lot of crazy stories in his career, but this one was definitely top 10. For content, I clarified, because that detail was important. Can't forget the content. What's attempted murder without monetization? He laughed, this genuine, surprised laugh that made his side hurt, which he tried to hide but failed. And you just left? No divorce papers, no confrontation, just ghosted? Legally, I'm still married, I admitted, which was something I tried not to think about too much. But Aaron Miles isn't married. Aaron Miles is single, employed, and allergy-free. Well, except for the nuts thing. Still got that. Aaron Miles, Grayson repeated, smirking. That's not your real name. Is Grayson yours? I shot back. Touché, he said, raising his mug in a toast. To fake names and fresh starts. We clinked mugs like idiots, and that was basically the beginning of the weirdest friendship I'd ever had. Over the next few months, Grayson became a permanent fixture in Willow Bay, and more specifically, in the diner. Once he was healed up enough to move without looking like he was auditioning for a medical drama, he started making himself useful. Turned out that being a detective had given him all sorts of random skills that small coastal towns desperately needed but didn't know they needed. First project. The diner's security system, which consisted of one camera from 1995 that might have been recording or might have just been a decorative box at that point. Nobody was really sure. Grayson took one look at it, said some choice words about whoever installed it, and showed up the next day with actual modern equipment. Where'd you get this stuff? Tommy asked, watching Grayson mount a new camera above the register. Friend owed me a favor, Grayson said, which was probably code for something, but we didn't ask. You get any trouble here? Define trouble, Tommy said. Jerry gets into fights with seagulls pretty regularly. I mean real trouble. Break-ins, theft, that kind of thing. Tommy shrugged. Not really, but I guess it's good to have anyway. Insurance might actually go down if they know we've got cameras. Grayson installed 4 cameras total. One on the entrance, one on the register, one covering the parking lot, and one in the back by the storage room. He showed Tommy and me how to access the footage on an app, set up motion alerts, basically brought the diner into the 21st century against its will. This is really cool, I said, watching the live feed on my phone. I can see Jerry stealing sugar packets from right here. I'm not stealing them. I'm borrowing them indefinitely. Jerry yelled from his usual seat, which made everyone laugh. The next thing Grayson did was help me get out of that motel room that smelled like wet carpet and broken dreams. Don't get me wrong, Rita was great and her crossword skills were impressive, but after 6 months I was ready for a place that didn't share walls with Jerry, who apparently snored like a freight train with a respiratory infection. There's a cottage for rent about a mile up the coast, Grayson mentioned one day while we were having lunch. Old guy who owns it moved to Florida, wants someone to keep an eye on it. Cheap, too. $500 a month. 500? I repeated, because in my old life, 500 wouldn't even cover parking. What's wrong with it? Nothing major. Needs some work. Paint, fixing some boards, general maintenance. But it's solid. Got a view of the ocean and everything. He drove me out there that afternoon in his beat-up truck that he'd somehow acquired. Again, didn't ask. The cottage was small. Like, really small. Probably 600 square feet total, with weathered blue siding and a porch that looked like it was held together by hope and salt air. But it had windows that faced the water, a tiny kitchen that was actually mine, and a bathroom where the shower didn't make grinding noises. I'll take it, I said immediately. The landlord, who Grayson knew somehow, the man had connections everywhere, agreed to knock 100 off the rent if I fixed it up. So that's what I did. Grayson helped me paint, replace rotted boards, fix the porch railing that was definitely a safety hazard. Tommy donated some old furniture from his garage. Deb brought over kitchen supplies. Joe showed up with a first aid kit, because you're an accident waiting to happen. Within a month, I had an actual home. Not much, but mine. I could sit on that porch in the morning with coffee and watch the sun come up over the water and think about how far I'd come from that kitchen floor, wheezing and watching my wife drive away laughing. But Grayson wasn't done making himself indispensable to Willow Bay. About 4 months after he'd arrived, he started teaching self-defense classes at the community center. This building that was basically a large room with a basketball hoop and some folding chairs, but it worked. He started with just a few kids, teenagers who were bored and looking for something to do that wasn't getting drunk behind the fish processing plant. But word spread, and soon he had like 15 people showing up twice a week to learn how to throw a punch without breaking their own thumb and what to do if someone grabbed them. I went to watch one of his classes, mostly out of curiosity. Grayson was patient but firm, demonstrating moves and correcting form, and somehow making the whole thing feel less like a workout and more like he was teaching them a life skill they didn't know they needed. "Why'd you start doing this?" I asked him afterward, while we grabbed pizza from the only place in town that sold it, a gas station that also served surprisingly decent slices. "Because nobody taught me when I was their age," he said, taking a bite. "And because sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones you need protecting from. Figured these kids should know how to handle themselves." There was something heavy in the way he said it, something that suggested he'd learned that lesson the hard way. I didn't push, just nodded and changed the subject to whether pineapple on pizza was a crime against humanity. "It is, fight me." People around town started calling us the Bay Brothers, which was both ridiculous and kind of nice. We weren't brothers, we barely looked alike, and we'd known each other less than a year. But there was something about how we'd both shown up broken and somehow managed to build something functional out of the wreckage. Tommy joked that we should get matching jackets. Joe said we were like a buddy cop movie except with less shooting and more pancakes. Jerry said we reminded him of him and his brother before his brother moved to Nevada and stopped calling, which got weirdly emotional, and we had to distract him with free pie. I'd stopped thinking about Sabrina entirely. Stopped wondering what she was doing, if she tried to find me, if she even cared that I'd disappeared. My phone, my old phone, under my real name, was in a drawer in my cottage, powered off, forgotten. I didn't check social media, didn't Google myself to see if I was a missing person. Just let it all go. Until one night, about 8 months after Grayson had shown up, we were sitting on my porch drinking beer and watching the stars, and he asked, "You ever wonder if she misses you?" I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my beer, which would have been a tragedy because it was the good stuff. Tommy had given us some craft IPA from a brewery 2 towns over. "Miss me?" I wheezed, trying to catch my breath. "Grayson, buddy, she misses me like I miss anaphylactic shock." Which is to say, not at all. "You don't think she feels bad about what happened?" "Oh, she might feel bad," I said, taking a swig of beer. "But only because her favorite punching bag left the ring. She probably misses having someone around to humiliate. But miss me specifically? The actual person? Nah. You can't miss someone you never actually saw as human in the first place." Grayson was quiet for a minute, just looking out at the ocean. "That's pretty dark, man." "It's also pretty accurate," I said. "But you know what? I don't care anymore. She can miss me, hate me, forget I ever existed, doesn't matter. I'm here, she's there, and I'm eating pizza without fear of nut contamination. Life is good." He clinked his bottle against mine. "Life is good," he agreed. And sitting there on my porch with my friend, in my cottage, in my town, with my new life? Yeah, it really was. 5 years. That's how long it took for my past to come knocking, and wouldn't you know it, the universe had a sense of dramatic timing because it happened on the kind of stormy night that would make a horror movie director weep with joy. I'm talking full-on theatrical weather, wind howling like it had a personal vendetta against my cottage, rain slamming against the windows hard enough that I was genuinely concerned about breakage, thunder that sounded like God was rearranging furniture upstairs. The whole ocean was pissed off, waves crashing against the rocks loud enough that I could hear them over the TV, which was saying something because Grayson and I were watching an action movie where things exploded every 30 seconds. We'd made it a weekly tradition, Thursday night movie night. complete with pizza from the gas station. They'd upgraded to 3 types now, very fancy, and beer from Tommy's secret stash that he claimed was too good for regular customers. Grayson was sprawled on my couch like he owned the place, which honestly he kind of did at this point. He'd helped fix the roof, repaint the shutters, and install actual insulation, so I figured he'd earned squatting rights. "This is the dumbest thing I've ever seen," Grayson said, watching the protagonist outrun an explosion in slow motion. "That's not how physics works. It's a movie about a guy who fights crime with experimental weaponry he built in his garage," I said, reaching for another slice of pizza. "I don't think physics are the main concern here." "Still," he muttered, but he was smiling, which meant he was enjoying it even if he wouldn't admit it. The knock came during a particularly loud action sequence, so at first I thought it was just the wind slamming something against the side of the house. But then it came again, 3 solid knocks, deliberate, human. We both looked at each other with the universal expression of, "Who the hell is out in this weather?" "You expecting someone?" Grayson asked, already shifting into that alert mode he had, the cop instincts that never really went away. "At 9 o'clock during a storm?" "Yeah, I've got a full schedule of visitors," I said, standing up and brushing pizza crumbs off my shirt. "Maybe it's Jerry. He gets weird when it storms." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't Jerry. Jerry would just barge in yelling about the apocalypse and demanding to share our pizza. This knock was different, tentative, almost hesitant. I opened the door, and my entire world tilted sideways like someone had just pulled the emergency brake on reality. Sabrina, standing on my porch, soaked to the bone, mascara running down her face in black streaks that made her look like a raccoon who'd made some questionable life choices. Her hair, those perfect curls that she'd always spent an hour styling every morning, was plastered to her head, dripping. She was wearing jeans and a jacket that was doing absolutely nothing to keep her dry, and she was shivering in that full-body way that meant she'd been out in this weather for a while. But what really got me, what made my heart do this weird stuttering thing, was her smile. That same smug, confident smile that I'd seen a million times. The one that usually preceded some prank or humiliation or "it's just a joke, babe." Except now it was cracked, broken at the edges, held together by desperation and whatever had driven her to track me down after 5 years. For a solid 10 seconds, I just stood there, frozen, my brain trying to process what my eyes were seeing. This couldn't be real. This was some weird nightmare brought on by gas station pizza and too much IPA. Any second now, I'd wake up on the couch with Grayson throwing popcorn at me and telling me I'd fallen asleep during the car chase scene. "Aaron," she whispered, and hearing that name, the fake name, my new name, the identity I'd built from scratch, coming out of her mouth felt like a violation somehow. Like she was trying to invade this space I'd carved out, this life I'd built specifically to get away from her. My mouth moved before my brain caught up. "It's Evan, actually," I said, and even to my own ears I sounded weirdly calm, almost detached. "Allergic to nuts and nonsense, remember?" She blinked at me, confused, her smile flickering like a dying light bulb. "What? No, your name is." "Not anymore," I interrupted, crossing my arms. "Been Aaron Miles for 5 years now. Clean slate, new life, 0 attempted murders. It's been great." "I don't understand," she said, and she actually looked lost, which was a new expression for her. Sabrina had always been confident, always sure of herself, always the one in control. Seeing her standing there confused and drenched and desperate was like seeing a different person wearing her face. "I've been looking for you for 2 years. Do you know how hard it is to find someone who doesn't want to be found?" "I'm going to take a wild guess and say it's pretty hard." "Yeah," I said. That was kind of the point. Behind me, I heard Grayson stand up. I didn't have to look to know he was there. I could feel his presence, solid and steady, the way you feel a wall at your back. He moved into the doorway next to me, arms crossed, silent, but radiating this quiet authority that came from years of dealing with people in crisis. He didn't say anything, didn't have to, just stood there like a very large, very capable shadow. Sabrina's eyes went from me to him, and I watched her smile. What was left of it? Crack like glass hitting concrete. "Who's this?" she asked, and there was something sharp in her voice now, something that sounded almost like jealousy, which was hilarious considering she'd literally tried to kill me. "Friend," I said simply. "Grayson, this is Sabrina." My wife. Technically. In the legal sense. Sabrina, this is Grayson. Guy who taught me that healthy relationships don't usually involve allergen-based murder attempts. Grayson nodded at her, still not speaking, and I could see her trying to figure out what was happening here. Was this my boyfriend? My roommate? Some hired muscle I'd brought in for protection? The confusion on her face would have been funny if the whole situation wasn't so surreal. Can I come in? She asked, hugging herself against the cold. Please? I drove 6 hours to find you. Part of me. The old me, the guy who'd spent 5 years being the good sport, the understanding husband, the one who always gave second chances, wanted to say yes. Wanted to invite her in, get her dry, hear her out, because that's what decent people did, right? You didn't leave someone standing in the rain. Even if that someone had once filled your birthday dinner with tree nuts and filmed you having an allergic reaction. But the new me, Aaron Miles, the guy who'd learned that self-preservation wasn't selfish, that guy knew better. No, I said, and the word felt powerful, final. Whatever you came here to say, you can say it from right there. She flinched like I'd slapped her. Evan. Aaron, I corrected. That's not my name anymore. You don't get to use that name. You don't get to show up here after 5 years and act like we're still married, like you still have any kind of claim on me or my life or my identity. I'm still your wife, she said, and there was something pleading in her voice now, something raw. Legally, we're still married. That has to count for something. It counts for paperwork I need to file, I said. That's about it. The rain kept coming down, soaking her further, and I could see her shivering intensify. Despite everything, despite the almonds and the humiliation and the 5 years of rebuilding myself from scratch, I felt a tiny pang of guilt. Not enough to let her in, but enough to make me feel almost human. Grayson must have sensed it because he shifted slightly, a subtle reminder that he was there, that I wasn't alone, that I didn't owe this woman anything except maybe divorce papers. Look, I said, softer now, but not soft enough to suggest forgiveness. It's late, it's storming, and you drove 6 hours. There's a motel about 2 miles back, Rita's place, can't miss it. Get a room, dry off, and we can talk tomorrow. In public. At the diner. You have a diner? She asked, latching onto this detail like it meant something. I work at a diner, I clarified. The crusty catch. Open at 6. Show up for breakfast if you want to talk. But right now, you need to leave. She opened her mouth to argue, to plead, to do whatever it was she'd planned when she decided to track me down and show up at my door looking like a drowned cat with regrets. But something in my expression, or maybe Grayson's continued silent presence, made her close it again. Okay, she said finally, quietly. Tomorrow. The diner. Tomorrow, I agreed. Now go, before you catch pneumonia and somehow blame me for it. She turned and walked back toward the car I could barely see through the rain. Some rental sedan that looked as miserable as she did. I watched until the taillights disappeared down the road, then closed the door and leaned against it, letting out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. You okay? Grayson asked. Honestly, I turned to look at him. I have no idea. Check back in 5 to 7 business days, and I'll let you know. He cracked a smile at that. Want to finish the movie or switch to something with less explosions and more existential dread? Let's go with explosions, I said. Reality's providing enough existential dread for one night. We went back to the couch, back to the movie, back to our pizza and beer like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. My past had literally shown up on my doorstep, soaking wet and desperate, and I'd closed the door on it. And you know what? It felt pretty damn good. I didn't sleep. Like, at all. I just lay there in my bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain finally calm down to a drizzle, and thinking about how 5 years of carefully constructed peace had just been nuked by a knock at the door. Grayson had crashed on my couch, partly because he'd had too many beers to drive, partly because I think he sensed I needed someone around who wouldn't let me spiral into an anxiety tornado. Around 5 in the morning, I gave up on sleep entirely and made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Grayson stumbled out of the living room looking like he'd fought a pillow and lost, took one look at me, and said, "You look like hell." "Thanks, that's exactly what I was going for," I muttered, pouring him a cup. Really nailing them, my past showed up and ruined my night aesthetic. "You gonna be okay at the diner?" he asked, leaning against the counter. "I can stick around if you want backup." "Nah, I got it," I said, even though I absolutely did not got it. She wants to talk, we'll talk. In public, with witnesses, where she can't try to poison me again. Smart, Grayson said. But I'm coming anyway. Not negotiable. I'll sit at the counter and pretend to read the paper like a normal person. You don't read the paper. I'll start today. Consider it a new hobby. We walked to the diner together through the post-storm morning. Everything smelling like wet earth and salt air. The sky was doing that thing where it couldn't decide if it wanted to be gray or blue, so it just kind of hovered in between looking confused. Kind of like how I felt, honestly. Tommy was already there when we arrived, prepping for the breakfast crowd, and he took one look at my face and said, "What happened? You look like you saw a ghost." "Close," I said, tying on my apron. "More like the ghost of bad decisions past showed up at my door last night looking for closure." "Your wife?" Tommy asked, because of course I'd eventually told him the whole story during one of those late-night cleaning sessions where you end up sharing your trauma over the sound of scrubbing grills. "Bingo. She coming here?" "Supposed to," I said. "Any chance we can pretend the diner's closed?" "Not a chance," Tommy said, but he squeezed my shoulder in that dad-like way he had. "But I'll be here. Grayson's here. You're not alone, kid." The breakfast crowd started trickling in. Jerry, Deb coming in for her pre-shift coffee, a few fishermen who always ordered the same thing, some tourists who looked lost. Normal Thursday morning stuff. I fell into the rhythm of it, flipping pancakes and scrambling eggs, and trying not to watch the door every 5 seconds like a paranoid meerkat. She walked in at 7:30. I'd been hoping she wouldn't show, that maybe she'd realized this was a terrible idea and driven back to wherever she came from. But nope, there she was, looking significantly more put together than last night. Hair dried and styled, makeup fixed, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my rent. She looked around the diner with this expression I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Judgment? Nostalgia for the husband she'd tried to murder? Our eyes met. She attempted a smile. I pointed to a booth in the corner, the one farthest from everyone else, because I didn't need the whole town hearing this conversation. "I'll take this one," I told Tommy, grabbing a pot of coffee and 2 mugs. I walked over to her booth, set down the mugs, poured coffee like I was serving any other customer, and said, "Morning. What can I get you?" She blinked at me. Aaron, I corrected. "And I'm working, so unless you want to order food, we can skip the pleasantries." "Just coffee is fine," she said quietly. I nodded and slid into the seat across from her, which was probably against some kind of customer service rule, but Tommy wasn't going to fire me for this. Grayson was at the counter as promised, newspaper open, definitely not reading it, definitely listening to every word. "So," I said, wrapping my hands around my mug, "you drove 6 hours and tracked me down after 5 years. I'm assuming there's a reason beyond nostalgia for the good old days when you tried to kill me with pasta." She winced. "Can you not say it like that?" "How should I say it?" I asked. "You deliberately put allergens in my food knowing I could die. That's attempted murder, Sabrina. The fact that it was filmed for YouTube doesn't make it cute. It makes it evidence." "I know," she said, and her voice cracked. Actually cracked. "I know, okay? I know it was horrible. I know I was horrible. That's why I'm here." "To apologize?" I asked. "Because if that's the case, you could have sent an email. Would have saved you a trip." "To explain," she said. "To tell you what happened after you left." "To." She paused, staring down at her coffee like it held answers. "To ask for forgiveness, I guess. Even though I don't deserve it." "You're right," I said. "You don't. But I'm curious, so go ahead. Explain. What happened after I walked out of the hospital and disappeared? How'd that work out for you?" She took a breath, and I could see her trying to compose herself, trying to find the right words. "Everything fell apart," she said finally. "Like, completely. 2 months after you left, Bella and Casey decided to do this prank where they convinced some guy his girlfriend was cheating on him. Except the guy had a heart condition we didn't know about, and he had a panic attack so bad he ended up in the ICU. Jesus. I muttered, because even knowing what they were capable of, that was dark. "His family sued us," Sabrina continued. "For emotional distress, medical bills, all of it. Our channel got taken down for violating community guidelines. Bella and Casey tried to start a new one, but the internet doesn't forget. We got doxxed, harassed, death threats. Lost sponsors, lost income, lost everything. The universe apparently decided to do my job for me." I said, which got a bitter laugh out of her. Yeah, pretty much, she agreed. Casey moved to Portland and changed her name. Bella's in therapy, like serious therapy. I filed for bankruptcy last year. My parents won't talk to me because I embarrassed the family. I'm working 2 jobs just to pay rent on a studio apartment that has mold and mice. Part of me, a very small, very buried part, felt bad for her. But the much larger part remembered sitting on my kitchen floor, throat closing, watching her drive away laughing while I genuinely thought I might die. So the sympathy was limited. I've been looking for you for 2 years, she said, eyes getting glassy. I hired a private investigator and everything. Cost me money I didn't have, but I needed to find you. I needed to say I'm sorry. It was stupid, Evan. So incredibly stupid. I never meant to hurt you. I leaned back, studying her face, looking for signs of manipulation or performance or any of the tells I'd learned to recognize over 5 years of marriage. But all I saw was exhaustion and regret, and the kind of defeat that comes from life repeatedly punching you in the face until you finally understand consequences. Oh, you meant to humiliate me, I said, keeping my voice level. Let's be clear about that. The hurting was just a side effect. Every prank, every video, every time you made me the joke, that was intentional. You meant to do that. You just didn't think about what it might cost. You're right, she whispered. You're absolutely right. Behind her, I saw Grayson lean back slightly in his seat, still pretending to read, but definitely monitoring the situation. His presence was comforting in a way I couldn't quite explain, like having a witness or backup, or just someone who gave a damn whether I was okay. Sabrina must have caught me looking because she turned, saw Grayson, then turned back to me with this expression that was part curiosity, part something else I couldn't identify. Is he your friend? I said firmly. Best friend, actually. Guy who showed up bleeding in this diner, and I helped save his life, and then he helped save mine. Not in the medical sense. In the taught me I'm worth more than being someone's punchline sense. She looked from him to me, and I could see her brain working, trying to figure out the dynamic. You're together? She asked, and there was something in her voice. Not quite jealousy, but close. I grinned, because the assumption was kind of funny and also none of her business. No, I said. He's just the guy who taught me how to stop being your favorite punchline. How to set boundaries. How to recognize that people who love you don't treat you like disposable entertainment. Grayson caught my eye from the counter and gave me the smallest nod. Not interfering, just acknowledging, letting me know he was there. Sabrina's face crumpled a little. I did love you, she said. I know you don't believe that, but I did. I just got caught up in the views and the attention and the money, and I forgot that you were a person, not a prop. And by the time I realized what I'd done, you were gone. Yeah, I said. I was. And you know what? Best decision I ever made. This life, this simple, quiet, nobody's trying to kill me life, is better than anything I had with you. I flip pancakes and fix boats and have friends who actually give a damn about me. I'm happy, Sabrina. Actually, genuinely happy. Without you. She nodded slowly, tears finally spilling over. I can see that, she said. You look good. Healthy. Like you're actually living instead of just surviving. I am, I agreed. So if you came here looking for reconciliation or a second chance or whatever Disney movie ending you had in mind, that's not happening. I'm not coming back. Aaron Miles is staying right here in Willow Bay. I know, she said, wiping her eyes. I know you're not coming back. I just needed you to know I was sorry. That I regret everything. That if I could go back and change it, I would. But you can't, I said, not unkindly. None of us can. We just have to live with what we did and try to be better going forward. She finished her coffee in silence while I sat there, feeling weirdly calm about the whole thing. 5 years ago, this conversation would have destroyed me. Now, it was just closure. The final chapter on a really terrible book I was never reading again. After Sabrina finished her coffee and stopped crying, which took a solid 10 minutes of awkward silence while I refilled mugs for other customers and pretended this was all totally normal. She asked if we could talk outside, somewhere more private. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of being alone with her, but the diner was filling up and Jerry kept looking over like he wanted to know what the drama was about, so I agreed. Give me 10 minutes, I told her, then walked back to the kitchen where Tommy was watching me with that concerned dad expression he'd perfected over the years. You good? He asked, flipping hash browns. Define good, I said. I'm not having a panic attack and I haven't stabbed anyone with a fork, so relatively speaking, yeah, I'm good. You want me to come out there with you? Nah, I said, glancing at Grayson, who'd abandoned his newspaper and was openly staring now. I got back up. But thanks, Tommy. Seriously. He nodded and went back to cooking, but I could tell he was keeping one ear on the situation, ready to intervene if things went sideways. That's the thing about small towns. Everyone's in your business, but it's because they actually care, not because they're looking for content. I walked back out, grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, and gestured for Sabrina to follow me. We ended up on the bench outside the diner, the same one where Jerry usually sat to yell at seagulls, while Grayson positioned himself by the window inside, visible but not intrusive. Like a very large, very watchful guardian angel who happened to know 17 ways to disarm someone. The morning had warmed up a bit, the sun finally committing to being out, and the smell of salt water mixed with bacon from inside the diner created this weird combination that shouldn't work, but somehow did. Sabrina sat at the far end of the bench, hugging herself even though it wasn't cold anymore, and I took the other end, maintaining distance. So, I said, because someone had to start this conversation. You said you wanted to explain. You drove 6 hours for this. Let's hear it. She took a breath, staring out at the street where exactly 2 cars were parked and a dog was investigating a trash can. I lost everything, Evan. Aaron. Whatever you want me to call you. I lost my channel, my income, my family, my friends. Everything I built just collapsed. And I deserved it. I know I did. But it still hurt. Yeah, losing everything sucks, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Imagine how I felt that night. Throat closing, gasping for air, watching my wife and her sisters drive away laughing. That was me losing everything too, Sabrina. My trust, my dignity, my belief that the person I married actually gave a damn about me. So when you say you lost everything, then you finally know how I felt that night. She flinched like I'd physically hit her. That's fair, she said quietly. That's completely fair. Damn right it is, I said. You want sympathy for consequences catching up with you? Wrong guy, wrong town, wrong decade. I gave you 5 years of sympathy, of being the good sport, of laughing along while you treated me like garbage. I'm fresh out. I'm not asking for sympathy, she said, turning to look at me with red-rimmed eyes. I'm just trying to explain that I understand now. What I did to you, what we did, it wasn't funny. It was cruel. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I studied her face, looking for the Sabrina I'd married, the one who'd seemed sweet and funny and kind before the YouTube channel took over our lives. But that person either never existed or had been buried so deep under likes and subscribers and viral content that she was gone. This person sitting here now was a stranger wearing familiar features, someone who'd been shaped by consequences I hadn't been around to witness. You know what the worst part was? I said, leaning back against the bench. It wasn't even the almonds, as messed up as that was. It was that you filmed it. You documented my near-death experience for entertainment. You watched me grab my EpiPen, watched me struggle to breathe, and your first instinct was to make sure you got it on camera. That's what I can't get past, Sabrina. Not the prank itself, but what it said about who you'd become. She started crying again, these quiet tears that rolled down her face without sound. I'd seen her cry before, lots of times. Sad movie tears, frustrated tears, manipulative tears when she wanted something. But these were different. These were the tears that came when reality finally caught up, and you couldn't run from it anymore. I don't know who I was, she whispered. I look back at those videos, at the things we did, and I don't recognize myself. It's like I was possessed or something. Except it wasn't possession, it was greed and stupidity and thinking that views mattered more than people. At least you figured it out eventually, I said. Even if it took losing everything to get there. We sat in silence for a minute, watching the dog give up on the trash can and wander down the street. Inside the diner, I could see Grayson talking to Tommy, probably giving him the rundown on what was happening. Deb had arrived for her shift and was pointing at us through the window, clearly asking questions. Can I ask you something? Sabrina said finally. And you can tell me it's none of my business, but are you happy? Like really happy? I thought about it for a second. About my cottage with the crooked porch. About Tommy and his terrible jokes. About Joe and her tough love medical advice. About Grayson and our Thursday movie nights. About flipping pancakes at 5 in the morning and painting docks in the afternoon and falling asleep to the sound of waves instead of Sabrina's laugh track. Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I really am. This life, it's not glamorous. I'm not making YouTube money or living in a nice house or doing anything that would look impressive on Instagram. But I'm not pretending to be okay while dying inside. I'm just okay. Actually okay. And that's better than anything I had before. She nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve. I'm glad, she said. I mean that. I'm glad you found something good. What about you? I asked, surprising myself. What's your plan? After this? Go home, she said with a bitter laugh. Back to my moldy apartment and my 2 jobs and my therapy sessions. Try to keep being better than I was. Maybe one day I'll actually believe I deserve to be happy again. Therapy's good, I said. You should stick with that. The door to the diner opened and Grayson stepped out, hands in his pockets, casual but deliberate. He walked over to us and said, Sorry to interrupt, but I figured this might be useful. He pulled out a business card and handed it to Sabrina. She took it, confused, and read it out loud. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, licensed therapist. She looked up at Grayson. What is this? Therapist in town, Grayson said calmly. Good person. Helps people who mistake cruelty for humor, among other things. Specializes in helping folks rebuild after they've blown up their own lives. Figured you might need someone local if you're serious about changing. Sabrina stared at the card, then at Grayson, and something in her expression hardened. You think this is funny? She snapped. Making fun of me for trying to apologize? I couldn't help it, I smiled. Just a little bit, but enough that she saw it. A little, I admitted. But don't worry, I'm not allergic to karma. Turns out watching consequences catch up with people who deserve them is actually pretty satisfying. Who knew? You're an asshole, she said, but there was no real heat behind it. More like exhaustion. Yeah, well, I learned from the best, I said, standing up. Look, Sabrina, I appreciate you coming all this way. I appreciate the apology. I even believe that you're sorry, for whatever that's worth. But we're done. We were done 5 years ago when you decided internet fame was more important than my life. So take Grayson's card, go to therapy, work on being better. But do it for you, not for me. Because I'm not coming back, and I'm not absolving you of anything. That's work you have to do yourself. She stood up too, clutching the business card like a lifeline. Will you at least sign divorce papers if I send them? I know we're technically still married, and that's not fair to you. Send them to the diner, I said. I'll sign them. Hell, I'll celebrate signing them. But after that, I don't want to hear from you again. No emails, no phone calls, no showing up in 5 years to see how I'm doing. This is goodbye, Sabrina. For real this time. She nodded, tears starting again. Goodbye, Evan. Aaron. Whoever you are now. I hope you stay happy. I will, I said. Because I'm not letting anyone drag me back into the kind of toxicity that nearly killed me. Not even for closure. She walked to her rental car, that same sad sedan from last night, and got in without looking back. I watched her drive away, down the main street, past the bait shop and the liquor store and the motel, until she was just another tourist leaving Willow Bay with baggage they came in with. Grayson stood next to me, both of us watching until the car disappeared around the bend. You okay? He asked. You know what? I said, feeling lighter somehow, like I'd been carrying something heavy for 5 years and finally got to put it down. I actually am. She apologized, I got closure, and she's gone. That's pretty much the best case scenario. You were good in there, Grayson said. Firm, but not cruel. That takes guts. I had good backup, I said, bumping his shoulder with mine. Thanks for the therapist card, by the way. That was perfect. Very, here's some help for your train wreck personality. He grinned. Figured she could use it. Dr. Mitchell actually is great. Helped me out after everything went down with the department. Woman's a miracle worker with people who've made spectacularly bad choices. We walked back into the diner where Tommy was waiting with fresh coffee and Deb was practically vibrating with curiosity. Jerry had moved to a seat closer to the door, clearly hoping for gossip. So, Tommy asked, drama over? Drama over, I confirmed. She apologized, I accepted the apology, but not her back. She's leaving, we're getting divorced. The end. Thank God, Deb said. I was ready to throw hands if she tried anything. Nobody messes with our Aaron. Our Aaron, I repeated, feeling my throat get tight. I like that. Well, you're stuck with us now, Jerry said from his new seat. You and Grayson both. Bay brothers for life, whether you like it or not. Could be worse, I said, tying my apron back on. Could still be married to someone who thinks attempted murder is a personality trait. Everyone laughed, and I got back to work, flipping pancakes, pouring coffee, living my simple life in my small town with my weird found family. Sabrina was gone, my past was finally handled, and the future looked pretty damn good. And the best part? Not a single almond in sight. A few months after Sabrina's visit, life in Willow Bay settled back into its comfortable rhythm, except now with one less weight on my shoulders. The divorce papers came through about 6 weeks after she left, sent to the diner like I'd asked, signed by both of us, notarized and official. I'd signed them at the counter while eating lunch, and Jerry had insisted on taking a photo for posterity. Tommy had bought a cake that said, "Congratulations on your freedom," which was both inappropriate and exactly what I needed. Being officially unmarried felt weird at first, like I'd been walking around with a backpack full of rocks, and suddenly someone cut it off. Lighter, but also strangely off balance. But I adjusted, same way I'd adjusted to everything else in this town that had somehow become home. The biggest change came about 3 months post-divorce when Grayson pitched an idea over our usual Thursday night pizza. "You ever think about teaching people the stuff we've learned?" he asked, pulling cheese off his slice in that annoying way he always did. "What? Like how to run away from toxic relationships and start over in a coastal town?" I said, "That's a pretty niche market, man." "No. Genius," he said, throwing a wadded-up napkin at me. "I mean actual useful skills. Self-defense, first aid, basic survival stuff. I've been doing the defense classes at the community center, but what if we expanded? Made it a real thing?" I thought about it for a second. "Like a business?" "Like a training center," he corrected. "Nonprofit, maybe. Something that actually helps people who are lost or broken or trying to rebuild. We've both been there. We know what it's like to need a second chance." And that's how Second Chance Training was born. We found a space, an old warehouse near the docks that used to store fishing equipment but had been empty for years. The owner, some guy who'd moved to Florida and was just happy someone wanted to use it, gave us a lease so cheap it was basically charity. We spent 2 months fixing it up, painting walls, installing mats, building a small office area, setting up a first aid station that Joe came and personally inspected like she was the safety police. Tommy donated some old tables and chairs. Deb spread the word to everyone who came through the diner. Jerry, surprisingly, turned out to be handy with electrical work and rewired the whole place for free because you boys are doing good work and I like projects. Even Rita from the motel showed up with cleaning supplies and helped scrub floors while chain smoking and telling stories about people who'd rented rooms and never came back. We officially opened on a Saturday in June, and I honestly expected maybe 5 people to show up. We got 37. People from Willow Bay, from neighboring towns, from places I'd never heard of who'd somehow gotten wind that 2 guys who'd rebuilt their lives from scratch were offering to teach others how to do the same. Grayson taught self-defense. Basic stuff at first. How to throw a punch without breaking your thumb. How to get out of holds. What to do if someone grabbed you. But he also taught the mental side of it. Confidence, awareness, trusting your instincts. The kind of stuff that applied whether you were facing down a mugger or a toxic relationship. I taught first aid and basic life skills. CPR, how to use an EpiPen, ironic, I know, what to do if someone was choking or having a heart attack. But also practical stuff. How to budget when you're broke, how to find work when you're starting over, how to ask for help when you're drowning. The unglamorous survival skills nobody teaches you in school. We kept it free for the first month, then switched to a sliding scale donation system. Pay what you can, and if you can't pay anything, that's fine too. Some people gave us $5. Some gave us 50. One lady whose husband we'd helped leave an abusive situation gave us 200 in a casserole that was honestly the best thing I'd ever eaten. The word spread. Local news did a story about us. Former detective and diner cook create haven for second chances, which was cheesy but brought in more people. We started getting emails from folks asking if we did online courses. We didn't, but maybe we would eventually. A couple of universities asked if Grayson would come speak about his experience with police corruption and whistleblowing. Life was good. Busy but good. One afternoon in late September, I was at the diner during my break, scrolling through my phone. My new phone, the one under Aaron Miles that had zero connection to my old life, when I saw a news headline that made me stop mid-scroll. Local social media influencer testifies against sisters in fraud case. I clicked it, and there she was. Sabrina. Looking smaller somehow, wearing a plain blazer instead of her usual designer stuff. No makeup, hair pulled back simple. The article said she'd been called to testify in a case against Bella and Casey, who'd apparently continued their prank career under fake names and gotten caught scamming people out of money with fake charity streams. Sabrina had provided evidence, screenshots, videos, financial records, that helped prosecutors build their case. She looked different in the courtroom photos. Humbled, serious, like someone who'd finally figured out that actions had consequences, and sometimes you had to face them head-on instead of running away or making excuses. I didn't feel angry looking at her picture. Didn't feel satisfied or smug or vindictive. Just done. Like that chapter of my life was so thoroughly closed that seeing her face was like looking at a stranger who happened to share features with someone I used to know. "You okay?" Grayson asked, sliding into the booth across from me. He'd stopped by to grab lunch before his afternoon class. I showed him the article. He read it, raised his eyebrows, and said, "Damn, she actually did it. Turned on her sisters and everything. Good for her, I guess," I said, pocketing my phone. "Hope she figures her life out." "You mean that?" "Yeah, actually," I said, surprising myself. "I'm not going to send her a congratulations card or anything, but I hope she gets her act together. People can change if they really want to. Look at us. We're basically functional adults now." "Speak for yourself," Grayson said. "I ate cereal for dinner last night." "Okay, semi-functional adults," I corrected. That night, after we'd closed up the training center and walked back along the coast road like we always did, Grayson pulled 2 beers out of his truck, and we sat on the tailgate watching the sun set over the water. It had become our thing. End of the week, couple of beers, talking about nothing and everything. "You ever miss it?" he asked after a while. "Your old life." "Which part?" I said. "The part where my wife tried to kill me, or the part where I was miserable but pretending everything was fine?" "Fair point," he said, taking a swig. "So, still allergic to nuts?" I thought about it for a second, then grinned. "Only emotional ones," I said. "The literal nuts still kill me, but the metaphorical ones? I've built up immunity." He laughed, that genuine laugh that meant I'd actually said something funny, and clinked his bottle against mine. "To immunity," he said. "To second chances," I added. "To not dying," he said. "To knowing when to leave," I said. "To finding better people," he said. "To life after the disaster," I finished. We drank to that, sitting there as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in colors that didn't have names. The waves crashed against the rocks below, seagulls argued about territory, and somewhere in town Jerry was probably yelling at someone about something completely unreasonable. And I thought about how far I'd come from that kitchen floor 5 years ago, wheezing and alone and broken. Thought about Rita's motel and Tommy's diner, and Joe's tough love and Grayson's friendship. Thought about all the people we were helping now, all the second chances we were creating. Life wasn't perfect. I still flipped pancakes for a living, still lived in a tiny cottage that smelled like salt water when it rained, still had days where I wondered what my life would have looked like if I'd never married Sabrina in the first place. But sitting there with my best friend, watching the stars come out over Willow Bay, drinking beer and laughing about nothing, that was happiness. Real, uncomplicated, nobody's filming it happiness. And that's how I knew I was finally free. Not just from Sabrina or the pranks or the marriage that nearly killed me, but from the person I'd been who accepted that treatment in the first place. That guy was gone. In his place was Aaron Miles, pancake flipper, first aid instructor, friend, survivor, and professional knower of when to leave. "Hey," Grayson said, breaking into my thoughts. "You good?" I looked at him, at the ocean, at the town I'd stumbled into by accident, and decided to stay in on purpose. "Yeah," I said, and meant it completely. "I'm really good."